World Peace Council statement against attacking Syria.
Don't attack Syria! 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 Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out here. Thank you for coming out here in Vancouver on the last weekend of summer for many. On this long weekend, it's very important your presence here today. This is a global day of action against the threatened U.S. attack against Syria. So give yourselves a round. You're out today with over a dozen cities in Canada. And people all over the world, from London through the Middle East, Asia, Latin America, hundreds of rallies, big and small, opposing this latest aggressive U.S. threat of war. So applause to all of you for coming out here today. Thank you again. Hands off Syria!
Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria!
My name is Derrick O'Keefe. I'm one of the spokespeople for the StopWar coalition in Vancouver. StopWar is a broad-based coalition in Vancouver that's been organizing since 2002. We came together and formed churches, mosques, people from synagogues, people from community centers, from labor unions, from all parts of the Lower Mainland, joined together over the threat of the U.S. war in Iraq. And well, here we are, more than 11 years later, and the U.S. is still threatening illegal and violent actions in the Middle East. They're still pouring fuel on the fires that they started, and they're still doing all of this in total disregard for international law and for the public opinions of their own country and for citizens of countries all over the world. And the Canadian government, since I'm opening by just talking about where this particular anti-war movement came from, StopWar forming in the opposition to the war in Iraq. Luckily, in Canada, we put enough pressure so that the Canadian government didn't openly support the war. They did not send Canadian troops in their hundreds and thousands to take part in the illegal war in Iraq. That was because of the anti-war movements and because of political pressure by normal, everyday people across the country. The Canadian government found other ways to help in Iraq. They invaded Afghanistan. They were part of the occupation of Afghanistan. But the person who was the leader of the opposition in 2003, when Canada decided not to attack Iraq, that person was Stephen Harper. And as leader of the opposition, the day after Canada decided not to be part of invading Iraq, Stephen Harper wrote a letter in the Wall Street Journal. And he said, "Dear George Bush," basically, I'm paraphrasing, "I'm very sorry that Canada will not be standing shoulder to shoulder with you as you carry out this illegal crime against humanity." So Stephen Harper, when he was in opposition, he wanted to join the war in Iraq. He wanted Canada to be part of that. Then, since he's been in power, he's been part of the occupation of Afghanistan. He's been the biggest saber rattler with threats of war against Iran. He's led the Canadian government in selling weapons to the most brutal regimes in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is the biggest recipient of Canadian weapons after the United States.
Shame!
And all this time, Harper's been waiting for the next U.S. war that he could support. And that's why we're gathered here today. StopWar's primary focus is to change the policy of our own government, to oppose aggressions that our own government is backing and supporting and taking part in. And so the primary focus today is to demand that the Canadian government not have anything to do with this threat of U.S. attack on Syria. Nothing. Hands off Syria!
Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria!
So we're going to have a number of speakers here today, and there are people handing out information. If you're just walking by, I'd encourage you to stop and listen. We're going to have some very informative speakers who will speak from a place of knowledge and passion in their opposition to this latest threat of war. Please stop, take some information from the people handing out flyers, take lots of pictures, share the pictures on Twitter and Facebook, All over the world, the hashtag is Hands Off Syria, and also No War with Syria. Use the hashtag. Check it out. Today there were thousands of people in the UK, in London, outside 10 Downing Street, in London, where just on Thursday night they put a whole bunch of egg on the face of the Conservative Prime Minister of the UK by defeating him in a vote in the Parliament. You remember who George Bush's best buddy was going into Iraq? It was the UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. Well, David Cameron failed where Tony Blair succeeded, and the people of Britain are responsible for stopping their own war machine. That's what we want to do here. We want to force our politicians to have nothing to do with this aggressive attack on Syria. So before we get our first speaker up here, I just wanted to very quickly outline the Canadian government's official position, because they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth on this issue. It's important we understand what the Harper government really is and what they're really trying to do. First of all, the Harper government is the worst enemy of freedom for people all over North Africa in the Middle East. From Mali to Iran to Iraq, Syria. They wanted nothing to do with the Arab Spring. They were the last government in the West supporting Mubarak. Supporting Ben Ali in Tunisia. They were very reluctantly giving up their friends, those dictators. Canada was part of invading Mali just last year, the aggressive war there. As I mentioned, Afghanistan, threats to Iran. So Canada now is pretending that they're concerned about humans in Syria, the hundreds of thousands in Syria who have died or been made refugees by this conflict. Canada is speaking as if they care about human rights. But this is an absolute fraud. The Canadian government has done nothing to indicate a true concern for the human rights of people in Syria and throughout the wider region. And when I said they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth, they're saying, on the one hand, they're saying they are marching lockstep with the United States and their allies. That's the Foreign Minister of Canada said they're marching lockstep. That sounds like a very militarist thing to say. And so they're backing the United States without any debate in the Canadian Parliament about this aggression. But on the other hand, Stephen Harper is saying that the Canadian government is not going to be involved militarily. If you believe that from Stephen Harper, I have some really cheap fighter jets that you could purchase, F-35s, because Harper is going to find ways through Canadian ships in the region or through logistics or through all of the Canadian officers who serve in NATO and the U.S. forces. Harper will find a way to militarily support this, even while he says he doesn't.
Shame on Dictator Harper!
Shame on Harper.
Shame.
And the last thing I wanted to mention, we can't go into all of the foreign policy of this government, but they talk as if they care about human rights in the Middle East, and yet the Harper government brags about being the best friend of Israel in the whole Western world. So this government, the Harper government, stood aside, and they didn't stand aside, they stood behind Israel as they slaughtered 1,400 people in Gaza a couple of years ago with the aggression against Gaza, Operation Cast Lead. They stood aside and applauded Israel as they massacred thousands in Lebanon, or more than 1,000 people in Lebanon in 2006. And Harper supports every new aggression by Israel in Gaza and all of the occupied territories. So that's what the true face of the Harper government, and that's what we're opposing here today. First speaker we're going to invite up is a member of the StopWar Coalition, also an organizer with the Iranian Center for Peace, Freedom and Justice, and the Iranian Left Coalition. I hope I got that all right. Here's our friend Parvin Ashrafi. Please welcome Parvin to speak.
Too high, too high.
Sorry. What a beautiful day. And what a world we have. In one hand, we have lots of social movements around the world opposing their own governments, opposing and fighting against imperialism, neoliberalism, colonialism, reactionary governments, reactionary sectarian governments, especially in Middle East. On the other hand, we are facing another war today. This is very shameful for governments who are going to war without having any support from their people. There is no support for war whatsoever. There is no justification for war whatsoever. Mr. Obama is taking war to another war with no legal basis. When I'm talking about legal basis, I mean, if United States wants to go to war, it should go through two laws, basically. One is international law, and the other one is national law. According to international law, countries cannot go to other countries unless they are facing a war or attack, and it is a matter of self-defense. What we are facing in Syria and the United States regarding this war, there is no self-defense for the United States. This is wrong when the United States is deciding to go to this war. And second law is the law that that if United Nations, supports, war, let's say, Mr. Obama doesn't have these two legal bases, first of all. Secondly, national law says that Mr. Obama should get Congress's approval, and he doesn't have this approval as well. So I'm not saying if he gets the approval from all these laws, he should go to war. No, there is no justification for war, as I said before. But I'm just talking the way that they are trying to convince the world that this is a legal war. That's what I'm talking about, legal basis. The argument that they put on table is about the chemical weapon. This is another justification for taking the war to another war, because the country that is talking about chemical weapon has a history of attacking other nations by chemical weapon, like what they did in Vietnam, what they did in Iraq, what they did in Yemen, in Somalia, in Afghanistan, if you check the history of United States imperialism, you see lots of war and occupations, lots of chemical weapons, lots of atomic bomb throwing on people who have no benefits of war. That's why this justification is wrong. No people around the world will buy this kind of justification when they are looking on the history of United States. Mr. Obama is talking about Syrian government. I personally, I'm not in favor of Assad regime, personally. But we are talking about a justification here. Just because United States doesn't like a government of any country, they get the right to go attack those countries. Yeah. Just because people in some countries do not like their government, they are not in favor of their government, and there is a civil conflict within the country. Is this allowing other countries to go and put their nose on those countries and bomb people who have no benefit of none of those sects, none of those people who are involved in the war?
Hands off Syria!
Basically, this basically this kind of justification is killing people no matter what. If those people are being killed by Assad or sectarian groups within the Syria, United States is deciding to take them and kill them again. Basically, the war is not the solution to what is happening in Syria.
Hands off Syria! 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 Hands off Syria!
This kind of war basically is going to escalate the situation in the Middle East. It's going to create more wars because we know that other countries are involved and have interest on this kind of proxy wars. We know that now Russia, China, Iran, they are talking about that they are going to go to defend Syria. We know that United States has its allies. We know that United States has military pact with European. If we know that Israel is going to defend United States on this war because of the conflict that they have with Syria. We know that when Israel is involved in that war as well, we know that all Europe that have with pact with United States, they might go defend Syria, defend Israel, because they clearly said that this pact is to defend Israel. Basically, we are facing a bigger war when this war starts. Basically, we're going to get, world is going to get involved in kind of war that is going to fuel the maybe another world war. We don't know, but it's gonna make worse the situation in Middle East, definitely. So we know that David Cameron was forced to abandon plans for Britain to participate in military attacks on Syria. This is forced because British people came out and directly and clearly said that they do not want to go to war. If David Cameron is forced to take this position for now, we can force Canadian government not to go to war as well. We will get together and plan. If we get together and plan lots of protest actions, if we talk to our MPs, if we talk in our work, if we talk in anywhere, any place that we go and try to say that is this wrong, this is a war that is wrong, and we don't want another war because we still have our bloody hand. Canadian government still has its bloody hand in Afghanistan. We don't want this another war. Canadian troops should be out of Afghanistan right away, and no another military attack from Canada to Syria, no to Iran war, no to another war, no to imperialism war, no to colonialism war, no to taking another countries just because their governments are unpopular to their own people.
They want their back.
So, end the war now. No attack on Syria.
No attack on Syria.
No attack on Syria.
No attack on Syria.
End the war now.
End the war now.
End the war now.
End the war now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parvin. Let's hear it for Parvin. No attack on Syria.
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 Hey, we have a little bit to be hopeful for about the power of people because of what they did in the UK. And just today, in the United States, President Obama was forced, I would say, by the different pressures he's under, to say that he will go to the US Congress to seek approval for striking Syria on September 9th. So it's possible this attack has been delayed already by the power of the people and the isolation of the war. They are very isolated, and David Cameron's, he'll be watching his back in the UK. The last time a British Prime Minister went to Parliament to try to get them to support a war and lost the vote was in 1752, I think, the 1700s, and the Prime Minister resigned the next day. So we may soon be saying goodbye to David Cameron, which would be a big win for our side. It's looking a little more of a long-term. The coup in Haiti in 2004 was something backed by the Canadian government, and Harper has continued a very negative role for the sovereignty and justice for the people of Haiti. So I'm going to welcome up now Roger Annis to speak. Please give Roger a welcome. Thank you.
What a difference 3 days makes. When we met 3 days ago in StopWar to plan together with others who helped us organize this day, to plan this day of protest, join the International Day of Protest, everything looked pretty dark. It looked like we were within hours or maybe days of the massive strike on Syria that the US and its allies were talking about. That was only 3 days ago. How much things have changed since then? This terrific vote in the British Parliament, which of course really is just a reflection of all that's gone on in Britain in the last 10 years. The massive collective rethink that the British people have done of the lies that they were told as justification for the attack on Iraq in 2003. We've seen the hesitations of the Obama administration grow as the allies that they hoped to have for this attack on Syria fall away one by one. In Europe, he's left with the government in France, which is not a government on a particularly stable founding. France is going through a very difficult economic crisis right now. It's just been through a war in Mali in which a growing number of French people are asking, well, what's it all about? What's changed in Mali? This is a desperately poor country. Have we done anything as France to try and bring up the people of Mali from the desperate poverty that they're living under? And we've seen a nervous Prime Minister in this country. Yes, they're talking about supporting the U.S. and so on. We expected that from the Conservative government, but support them with what? If I was sitting in the White House right now and I was President of the United States and looking at the pronouncements from the Canadian government, I'd say, gee, thanks for the words. We're going to need a little bit more than that if we're going to carry this through. But the Canadian government is not jumping into this with its fighter jets.
They signed a deal with China for defense.
So what's happening here? Well, for the last 10 years, we've been mobilizing and organizing against war, call it 12 years even, since the year 2001. And an awful lot of times we asked ourselves, what is this for? We can't get the hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Vancouver. We've had some big rallies for sure, especially when the war in Iraq was threatened in 2003. But the hundreds of thousands of people that have come out in Britain from time to time, and other big numbers, we just didn't seem to get it. But we weren't giving ourselves enough credit. All of you out there not giving yourselves enough credit for the neighbors that you've talked to, for the letters that you've written to editors of newspapers, for the letters you've written to members of Parliament, for the resolutions that you've passed in your trade union locals. Everything we've done over the past 10 years to try and educate ourselves, our friends and neighbors, our colleagues at work, whoever it may be, it's paying off today, because today the war makers, they have to hesitate. They don't have the blind support that they thought they had in 2003. We're a thinking people, and we don't accept war, and we above all don't accept their lies. So we have built an anti-war movement, and we built a movement that today, and especially in Britain, but even here in Canada, we've been able to act at this crucial moment and stay the hand of the war makers. For how long? Maybe some days, maybe some weeks. But even the war makers, what are they saying? They're saying, well, we'll have these limited strikes on Syria. No more mass invasion of countries. Sorry, those days are gone, at least for now. And that's another achievement that we made. Now, one thing we should learn from these last 10 years, my goodness, they lie. When Obama, when Harper, when Cameron spins us a story of what they say is going on in Syria and what must be done, our first reaction must always be, they are lying. Let them prove that they're not lying. And that's very important today in Syria. Because what are we being sold today? We don't know. The UN inspectors haven't produced their report. We haven't had enough other independent reports of who was responsible for the horrific attack in Syria. Well, the US government says, it doesn't matter, trust us. Literally, they say, it doesn't matter, trust us. We're not going to tell you what the facts are. You don't need to know. We'll just tell you what we're going to do, and we want you to line up behind us in support. I'm sorry, those days are over. So they lie. They're also against the truth. They don't want the UN inspectors to finish their job. They rushed them out of there. And they said, well, we don't even care what they found out or what they're going to report. We're going to go ahead with our attack. Thankfully, we were able to stop them. So they lie. They're against the truth. They lied to us in Afghanistan. They said, we're going to go to war in Afghanistan to liberate the people of Afghanistan. Well, we know that's a lie. We didn't know it already. It's been proven to be so. They lied in Haiti in 2004. They said we have a responsibility to protect doctrine here. We're going to go in and overthrow the elected government of Haiti and improve matters in Haiti. Well, you saw on the television in the days following the earthquake in 2010, where were the improvements that were brought into Haiti for 6 years after the 2004 coup? They lied. There was no intention to improve anything in Haiti. It's all about keeping the people of the third world as sources of cheap labor, keep their countries as sources of cheap resources, and above all, strip away the political autonomy of the countries of the third world. That's the politics of big power domination today. That's what was played out in Haiti. That's what they're trying to play out today in the Middle East. There is a war going on in Syria. There are enormous humanitarian stakes involved. We all have...
Well, thank you very much all for coming here to express your support with Syrian people, your support with peace, and especially your stance against imperialist intervention, not only in the Middle East, but in the world as a whole. I am here today in order to read a small statement that was issued by Alba Movimiento. Alba Movimiento is a continental alliance of grassroots social movements with wide reach throughout the Americas. The Hugo Chavez People's Defense Front, to which I belong, which is a solidarity network with Venezuela, is part of Alba Movimiento, and as such we signed into the statement that we're about to read. Against the attack on the Syrian people, no more deaths and lives. International groups, social movements and organizations from different areas strongly condemn the imperialist maneuvers of the United States government and its economic interests. Once again are making preparations to invade a country with the excuse of wanting to promote peace. We, however, know, as we have learned from history, that US invasions only generate more deaths and misery for the people who suffered their attacks, as in the case of Vietnam, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Iraq, and many other countries that have had to endure US intervention. The New York Times editorial. That's the spirit. The New York Times editorial of August 27 notes that there is little doubt now that President Obama is planning some sort of military response in Syria. The monarchist's daily El País in Spain also highlights a topic on its cover today, that is August 27. Large hegemonic media is setting the stage to legitimize this intervention, which, as we all know, lurks geopolitical control purposes over an area of the world that is strategic to imperialist interests. The use of chemical weapons must be condemned in any part of the world. However, in this case, there is no clear information on who is using them. Also, what transnational company partake in the production of them. Nor is it clear who has been selling these weapons. We, the people of Latin America, will remain alert and strongly condemn the actions of the United States, as the people of Cuba are already condemning. The United States global police state, now commanded by a Nobel Peace Prize winner, has violated all relevant UN bodies with the complicity of white imperial European countries, such as France and the United Kingdom. It imposes peace in the world by the force of arms. It is the peace of cemeteries. Regardless of the position towards the government of Syria, the defense of the autonomy of our Syrian brothers and sisters must be the main and common flag of our social movements worldwide. for a true global peace with social justice, independence and sovereignty of the peoples of the world, we must denounce by all means this serious situation. America's August 27, 2013. No intervention in Syria.
No intervention in Syria! No intervention in Syria! No intervention in Syria!
Thank you, everyone, and once again, thank you for coming.
Hey everyone, I'm here from Venezuela and representing the Venezuela's people who has awakened and is against imperialism. And I would like to say this. There is a Venezuelan deputy who has a Syrian background and he has a permit to go to Syria and defend his people and defend his territory. So we just want to send our hopes to him and best wishes to him. No war with Syria!
No war with Syria!
¡Viva Venezuela! ¡Viva América!
Venezuela!
¡Viva el mundo! ¡Viva la paz! ¡No a la guerra!
¡No a la guerra!
Pueblo unido
Jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido.
The people united will never be defeated. For our friends there, the people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The peoples united will never be defeated. Peoples united will never be defeated.
El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido.
StopWar Coalition and many friends and allies, we called a protest, and we had a pretty raucous few hundred people surrounding the Vancouver Club a couple years ago, and we kept up that protest for hours. Dick Cheney did come to Canada. Canada, you might know, for many people like George Bush, Cheney, and the other war criminals from that U.S. administration, Canada under Harper is pretty much the only safe place they can travel. A number of countries in Europe have said they might be subject to arrest for war crimes if they go there, but Harper has kind of an open-door policy. Anyway, I'm bringing up Dick Cheney because our next speaker, Gail Davidson, and you are still here, right, Gail? Gail is still here, I hear her. Gail Davidson was the person in Canada who put in the most effort. She's a lawyer, part of Lawyers Against War, who made very, very strong and undeniable legal arguments for Canada denying entry to Cheney, and for the fact that if he was let in, the Harper government should have arrested him. So let's hear it for Gail Davidson for her work in opposing war criminals like Dick Cheney. Now, there's a good part of the story because the Harper government didn't arrest Cheney. They didn't listen to this lawyer here from Vancouver, Gail. But Dick Cheney, who is not in the best health after so many war crimes and so many years, after being inside there with seeing the protesters outside for hours, he had another event scheduled in Toronto later that year. And his people said, it's not safe for you to go to Canada anymore. Those protesters are too fierce. You've got to stay out of Canada. So Gail has done her part to keep Dick Cheney away from all of us. Please welcome Gail Davidson. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And just to take up on that note and on what Nazim said, wherever you are, Nazim ended his talk by saying, we can win. Collectively, we can't. Individually, we can't do anything. But collectively, we can win. And just to follow up on the Dick Cheney thing, just after Dick Cheney was here, George Bush came to Surrey. Mayor Watts said it was a matter of freedom of expression that they allow the people of the hobnob people, wealthy people coming to Surrey to listen to George Bush. Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada, Lawyers Against the War, and a Vancouver group called the Centre for International Justice, we all took various actions, and then we filed a report with the Committee Against Torture in Geneva, outlining that the law required what we had told Canada year after year after year. We told the police year after year after year. We'd said, because Canada's a party to the Convention Against Torture, if a person reasonably suspected of torture, a foreign national crosses the border into Canada, Canada is obliged to arrest that person and then make sure that they're either prosecuted for torture in Canada or extradited to another country for prosecution. So we said they were obliged once they let George Bush in to arrest him. And guess what? The Committee of Torture agreed with us and filed their report that's there on the Committee of Torture website for everybody to see. So we're pretty sure George Bush will never be back in Canada. I just have a short message for you on Syria. Military intervention, U.S. or otherwise, without the authorization of the UN Security Council would be not just an international crime, but what has been since the Nuremberg Convention the worst crime of all crimes, a crime of a war of aggression. Not only is it a crime to do that, but in my view, it is a crime to counsel such action. Now, while our Prime Minister is saying Canada doesn't want to participate at this time militarily in an attack on Syria, he and other ministers of the Harper government are saying they support military intervention by the U.S., which in my view is itself a criminal offense to be counseling the commission of a criminal offense. Now, I spoke to a young man in the audience a while ago today who was telling me that there was a duty to intervene. He said a duty to intervene militarily when you find out there's human rights abuses taking place in another country, then if the U.S. finds out about it, there's a duty on the U.S. to intervene in that country where human rights abuses are alleged to be taking place. Now, I hope that everybody here knows that that is absolute and utter and terrifying and terrible nonsense. Of course, that is not true. To military there is, in fact, an international law prohibiting military intervention. Of course, and what our responsibility is in this situation is our responsibility is to individually and collectively find ways to intervene to stop military intervention in Syria. And if we don't, then we bear responsibility for the consequences, because the U.S. led an intervention in this is just recent ones, in Kosovo, in Iraq, in Libya, in Afghanistan, and what has happened in those countries has not been the saving of people, the saving of cultures, the saving of resources, the saving of economies. It's been the destruction of everything. And Syria is just the next country on the planned route of destruction, probably on the way to Iran. So it's the responsibility of each and every one of us to educate the people who have, to make our voices loud and to help educate other people with voices. So to go and visit, don't just write to your member of parliament, don't just write to your member of the Legislative Assembly. I know they're provincial, get them engaged also, but go and visit them and outline the law to them. And if you want to know, if you want some pointers on what the law is, you can email me at www.lawyersagainstthewar.org. Just look up Gail Davidson on the internet and you'll find me. I'd be very happy to help you. So thank you for being here today. We're faced with very grave consequences for the people of Syria if we don't act to stop an intervention. Thank you.
It's wonderful to see so many people standing out here today. Here, on unceded and occupied Coast Salish territories stolen from the Indigenous people of this land, to say that we will not stand for Canadian and U.S. and European intervention and yet another war of destruction on any Indigenous land, on Syrian Arab Indigenous land in this case, or anywhere else around the world. That we stand and we think of the people of Syria, who have suffered a great human tragedy in a horrendous civil war for over 2 years now. Does anyone imagine that US bombing, that Canadian support could do anything other than create more and deeper, vast misery in the lives of the Syrian people? Does anyone believe that the goal of Barack Obama and Stephen Harper and James Cameron, thwarted by the British Parliament, but James Cameron nonetheless, is to do anything but weaken the people of Syria, but weaken the people of the region, to divide them, to encourage sectarianism, division, and separation, and war, in order to gain control over resources, in order to exercise their hegemony over the region and the world? There can be no doubt that Stephen Harper is not motivated by human compassion, and that Barack Obama, as he sent his drones to kill families and children in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Yemen, is not motivated by his concern for human rights, as he plans to send cruise missiles and bomb the sovereign territory of Syria. It is not motivated by concern for human rights. It is not motivated by compassion. It's motivated by imperialism. And we are here today to say no. When we look at Palestine, we look at the past 66 years of occupation and genocide against the Palestinian people. Who do we see lined up in support time and time again? The United States. We see John Baird and Stephen Harper going around the world to proclaim their deep support and fidelity for Israel as it builds settlements on occupied Palestinian land. To proclaim their support for Israel as it imprisons over 5,000 Palestinian political prisoners. To proclaim their support for Israel as 5 million Palestinian refugees around the world are prohibited from returning to their homes, and they claim that they care about human rights. They care that they're motivated by concerns for Arab dignity and human rights and liberation. We see who they are in Palestine, and we see who they are in Syria. And we know that it's our responsibility in this country, on this land, to say that our governments and our tax dollars and our resources will not be used to rain down death and destruction on the people of Syria. And that our governments and our tax dollars and our resources, and frankly the resources of the indigenous people of this land that have been stolen from them, will not be used to rain down death and destruction on the people of Palestine, on Syria, on Iran, and anywhere else in the world that Obama and Harper are threatening their bloody wars of destruction. This is not humanitarian intervention. There's no such thing. There is no such thing as a humanitarian intervention on the part of the United States, Canada, and Europe in Syria. The only intervention we've seen for the past hundreds of years by these countries in this land has been that of colonialism, has been that of division, has been that of war and oppression, has been that of encouraging sectarianism instead of unity. Because the reality is that the unity of the people of Palestine, of Syria, of the Arab world, of people of the region, of people around the world has always meant the lessening of the power of those who seek to reap the profits of the richness of the land and its resources and its people. And so today, it's our responsibility to say that these governments cannot do this. It's our responsibility because they're doing it in our name. And if we're silent, we're complicit and we're letting it happen. And here we have to take a stand and say that we will not let that happen. That just like Dick Cheney 2 years ago, they will not pass. And we will not stand by silently, and we will not be ineffective as the cruise missiles and the bombs and the destruction rain on Syria. And instead, we stand with the Syrian people, and we stand with the Syrian families, and the Syrian mothers and fathers and sisters and children. And we stand with the people of Syria and say no, no to your cruise missiles, to your war, to your sanctions, to your intervention. No war on Syria! No war on Syria! No war on Syria! No war on Syria!
Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria!
Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria! Hands off Syria!
Syria! Hands off Syria! No war in 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 Syria!
Representation of the U.S. government. We've been here many times in the last dozen years and decades before that. As someone once said, I think it was a governor from Texas who went on to do other things, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Or something like that. So he's watched it as well. What we're saying is this government has tried to fool the world so many times. We are no longer fooled. No one is fooled by their plans on Syria, and although they have a more articulate president now who can get the sayings right and read the teleprompters very well and is very handsome, very eloquent, it's no less of an illegal war machine, it's no less of an empire under Obama. So we just have a couple speakers here before we head on back together to the art gallery. I wanted to welcome up Faris from the Syrian community here in Vancouver.
Thank you everyone for being here. With you, we're gonna stop the war.
Yeah.
We're gonna tell this guy who's sitting there, if your bomb is gonna give him a peace, we're gonna sit here and live here and stop this war. Syrian. I want to let the Canadian government, I will not let Canada support any war against Syria because we are Canadian. I tell you guys, I'm from Syria. We suffered a lot. And we have our neighbor in Iraq. We have so story. We asked him, did you enjoy American bombing? Of course they didn't enjoy it. They got killed. They got suffered. Women, children. The bomb doesn't recognize who you are. They're going to bomb the building. They said they're going to bomb only the government. At night. Who the hell knows who lives in that building? They're going to stop the war. Enough war. We're going to tell that foolish guy who's sitting in the White House. Wake up, guy. Wake up. Stop dreaming of killing people. Again, I'm proud to be a Syrian Canadian guy living on this free land.
Probably. They say they're going to vote in Congress on September 9th. Everyone has to keep the pressure up. If they try to sneak one in or they launch the bombing at any time between now and then, people are asking for emergency demonstrations on the day of the attacks. So we're going to have rallies at 6 p.m. on the day of the bombing. If it does happen, emergency rallies at the Vancouver Art Gallery. So there's still time to organize, still time to protest. I think we're going to have one more speaker here, Charles Boylan, radio host of at Co-op Radio and rep for the CPCML, has asked to say a few words. And then we'll all go back together nice and loud again like we did before to the art gallery. So thank you. Here's Charles.
Thanks, Derrick. First of all, I think it should be reiterated what the sisters spoke in support of the Palestinian and the movement here, that this is indigenous, unceded territory. And as she drew the links, we should always remind ourselves that the future of British Columbians, the future of Canadians, needs to be built on an anti-colonial, anti-racist, modern basis that defends the rights of every human being. Part of defending the rights of human beings in Canada means also to defend the rights of our brothers and sisters around the world. We are one humanity. I want to say just a couple of words about the arguments that are used against humanity and for war. One of the arguments that is used continuously is the argument actually introduced into the United Nations by Mr. Axworthy, who was the former Foreign Minister of Canada. And he introduced a conception that violates the entire world historical experience of the anti-fascist war that ended with the foundation of the United Nations. And that fundamental law, established, like Gail Davidson said, is a crime, the greatest crime internationally. It's a crime against the peace. But Axworthy slipped into the United Nations a phrase called duty to protect. Because, you know, when an imperialist gangster wants to break into somebody's house and rape and ruin and rob, they have to justify it with humanitarian sounding phrases. And that's what the United States, that's what Britain, that's what Canada and NATO have been doing now since the collapse of the bipolar division of the world. They have been invading one country after another, violating the sovereign rights of one country after another in the name of democracy, in the name of human rights, in the name of duty to protect. Brothers and sisters, we stand here to defend the Charter of the United States, the United Nations, the Charter of the United Nations, which says that war is a scourge on humanity. We say that every state, large and small, has the right to self-determination and I also want to add a couple of words about a very peculiar sequence of events. On Wednesday, August the 14th, a fascist coup d'etat organized by a general trained in the United States of America, whose army is financed to $1 billion a year in the United States of America, slaughtered hundreds, maybe thousands of Egyptian patriots marching for democracy that they had waged a revolution for 2 years ago.
Shame!
Shame! 1 week exactly to the day, on August the 21st, suddenly there is a gas attack in Syria, and suddenly the whole focus is away from what is happening in Egypt onto what is happening in Syria to justify an aggressive, illegal, criminal, racist war against the people of the Middle East. And in conclusion, I just want to say this caution. Because, you know, Obama has got a very little room to maneuver. He's got a Secretary of State who has boxed him into a corner saying, if the United States doesn't hit Syria, this will be a disgrace to the United States. The United States will lose face around what's Obama going to do. So now he's got to hit Syria. But Obama has said, oh, we're not going to put boots on the ground. We're just going to do a little hit on Syria. Okay? If I am the head of the Syrian state, I say, okay, U.S. going to give a little hit on us. We're going to give a little hit right back. That's the danger. Because if Syria were to defend its sovereignty, which legally, that is the only legal reason to launch a warlike effort to defend yourself, then where the hell will humanity go from there? Because the day that Syria strikes back at the United States of America, which would be their legal, moral, ethical right to defend their nation, then the United States is going to wage blood vengeance war on the people of Syria. That is a great danger. And then what will Iran do? Then what will Russia do? So ladies, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends, we have to, as other speakers have said, we live in very dangerous times. And that's why my party puts a slogan, I don't know what's over there. It says, for an anti-war government in Canada, there is only one foreign policy for every state on this planet, and that is an anti-war policy.
No peace. U.S. out of Middle East, no justice. No peace. U.S. out of Middle East, no justice. No peace. U.S. out of Middle East, no justice. No peace.
U.S. out of Middle East.
No justice. No peace.
U.S. out of Middle East.
No justice. No peace.
U.S. out of Middle East.
No justice. No peace.
U.S. out of Middle East.
No justice. No peace. U.S. out of Middle East. No justice. No peace.
Thanks everyone for coming out today. We have to check with our Egyptian friends who are organizing a rally next weekend against the coup and the situation there. But I think if U.S. Congress is having a vote on Monday, September 9th, next weekend on Saturday the 7th or Sunday the 8th, one of those days we should be back for sure with a bigger rally. And as I said, if they try to attack, we'll have an emergency rally on the same day. So stay tuned for more on that, and we'll see you out in the streets again here. Thanks, everyone.